Hey everyone, so the issue that we are going to be exploring today is one that happened earlier this year, around March I think, and it's related to Torn governance. Okay, so we are going to be seeing how one can actually upgrade a contract using create and create to, using it's a tricky pattern, but it's one that the attacker actually used to trick the governance of Torn and actually take over it. So we are going to be seeing how an attacker created a proposal for the governance. We are going to be exploring how it actually did the whole setup. We're going to be seeing the transactions. I'm going to be showing a proof of concept about it, not reproducing the entire exploit, but just sharing with you like a tiny example, a sandbox example on how this could be achieved by the attacker. And then the attacker was actually able to upgrade the proposal contract to a malicious one. It's interesting that if you see like the addresses don't change in this case, okay? So without even using proxies, the attacker was able to upgrade the code in a proposal contract, remaining at the same address and actually tricking the entire governance of Torn. So let's see a setup, but actually before we do that, just credit to the usually awesome rekt.news, and they cover the whole issue. There are many people involved in the investigation. Credit goes here, and contracts and transactions and everything. You can find lots of things here, lots of resources and links, and then it's up to you to do your homework and explore each of those links. So that's what I did, and in this talk ideally I should be summarizing the whole thing, right? But of course for the details you can go to each transaction, each contract, and do your own research. That's the way to learn the most about this. So to understand the setup, we should first talk about a transaction, which is the transaction that created all the contracts necessary for this to happen. There are at least 3 contracts involved here, okay? So there's one that is being created at the beginning, then one that is created using create to, and then a third one being created using the create opcode as well. So you can go to the actual transaction, which is here, and you can see it's in action, okay? So you have a deployer contract, which is the one the attacker is calling from its COA. The deployer contract is actually then calling create to in this line on a proposal to create a proposal factory, and then the proposal factory has a create function that is called, which is a nested code that ends up creating the proposal contract, right? So this is the actual proposal that was submitted at the beginning at Tornado Cash. As far as I know, that proposal didn't look malicious. It did have a specific opcode that we're gonna be seeing, which could have made it look like suspicious. But anyway, nothing too fancy other than like the whole chain of deployment, which is actually what's important here. Also note that this is the contract that's about to be upgraded. We are gonna be seeing how for a malicious contract actually, but note that there are no like fancy delegate codes nor proxies nor that kind of things, because that could have made the whole setup look quite sketchy, right? So the attacker actually did this whole deployment chain to do the right setup to be able to upgrade a contract without proxies. Let's see how that played out. So this is the transaction, and this is the setup like in a nicer diagram. Okay, so I'm gonna go from left to right. So we have an attacker EOA that deploys the deployer contract. Remember at least the first characters of those addresses because they are quite important to understand this. The deployer contract then we use create to deploy a proposal factory, and the proposal factory will be called after being created, will be called by the deployer contract calling its create function. It has a create function, the proposal factory. I'm going to be showing code later. And the proposal factory, once it's executing its create function, it will actually execute a creation of a contract, the proposal contract, with the create opcode in this case. Okay, so the proposal factory has been created using create to, and the proposal contract has been created using create. Okay, quite different deployment methods. Again, the transaction is right here, but I think this is a bit nicer. The thing is how to upgrade this thing, right? Because the attacker wants to upgrade this proposal contract, but it doesn't have proxies, it doesn't have nothing too fancy. So how could the attacker go about this? Well, at the beginning you could imagine that, well, there's something that could be done that won't be actually successful, but let's imagine for a moment what could happen. So the proposal factory has a create method, a function that can be called, right? So perhaps to upgrade the proposal contract, well, you could include a self-destruct operation in the proposal contract such that when you call a function on it, you destroy the proposal contract, and then you call create on the proposal factory, and then you deploy a new proposal contract. Yes, but the problem is that when you self-destruct the first proposal contract and you call create on the proposal factory, the nonce of the proposal factory contract changes from 2 to 3. It's now 2 because it was already used to deploy this proposal contract, and now it's 2 and moves to 3 when it creates the new one. But also know that if the attacker had done this, it would have been unsuccessful because the address has changed now. Right? The new proposal contract has a new address. And that's because the create opcode is being used, and the address that the create opcodes uses to deploy a contract is dependent on the nonce of the account that is being used for deployment and the sender. Okay, so you can use cast, actually, that command line utility that comes in Foundry, to compute the address, passing the address of the proposal factory, passing the nonce as well, and noting that if you use nonce 1, you will get the first proposal contract address, which is this one, C503, and if you pass nonce 2, which is in this case, you will get 0D74, meaning that the new proposal contract has a new address and things have changed, and that could be quite telling for anybody participating in governance, noting that, well, the proposal contract has changed, so something is going on, right? So this is probably not the best way for the attacker to upgrade the contract. But the attacker had another way. So let's see how the attacker was able to do this without upgrading the addresses and without using proxies, okay? So this is a contract, again, that the attacker wants to upgrade, and it's been created using create. Remember that when we create, the proposal factory would create 2. So now, what if the attacker included 2 self-destruct operations, one in the proposal contract and another one in the proposal factory? That is quite different from what we had here, right? It's quite different, and actually is what the attacker did. So the attacker was able to self-destruct the proposal factory, was able to self-destruct the proposal contract, calling the emergency stop function on the deployer contract, and that created a chain reaction, destroying the proposal factory and the proposal contract as well, right? There you have the transaction hash. If you go to take a look at it, it's quite simple. The attacker called the emergency stop on the deployer contract, that called the emergency stop on the proposal factory, and that called emergency stop on the proposal itself. The proposal itself self-destructed, and also the proposal factory was self-destructed, meaning that at that point, once the transaction finished, none of those contracts had code anymore, and both nonces of both contracts had been reset back to 0. That's an important point to take into account. So what now? The attacker was able to then redeploy at these same addresses, which is quite strange, right? Because I told you that these 2 addresses had no code at all, were self-destructed, and then the next transaction, the attacker was able to redeploy code to both of them at the same address. And, spoiler alert, the code of a proposal contract was actually different this time. So it was able to upgrade the code of a proposal contract, not changing its address at all. Again, this is the actual transaction where the attacker redeploys. Note that there is a call to the deployer contract which hasn't been self-destroyed. The proposal factory had, and that means that now it's being recreated using create2. And now that its create function is being called again here, and it's calling the create opcode, meaning that the proposal contract is being redeployed here, and that's the address of the old one, right? So it's creating something again at the same address with different code. How did that look like? Okay, we have to understand a little bit how create and create2 work. the attacker UOA is calling the deployer contract. That contract never changed, okay? The deployer contract was able to deploy the proposal factory using create2. Create2 doesn't use the deployer's nonce. It only uses certain data plus the deployer address plus a salt plus the init code, meaning that if you deploy a contract using create2, as long as you use the same deployer address, same salt, and same init code, the contract will always be redeployed at the same address, okay? So that's the way in which the attacker can redeploy the proposal factory, not changing its code and not changing its address. What does change between deployments is the nonce, because when the proposal factory contract is redeployed, the nonce is set back to 1 because contracts accounts start at 1, okay? So and we saw that the nonce was 2 or 3 at some point, depending on the slide that we saw. But now that's been redeployed, the nonce is back to 1. And remember that the nonce is quite important for create, okay? If you want to take a look at the EIP that explains create2, I would definitely encourage you to do that because you will understand far more details about how create2 works. Right, so I told you that the nonce is reset to 1 after the self-destruct of the proposal factory, and now the attacker will call the deployer contract, which in turn will call the create function of the proposal factory, and will deploy a new proposal contract using create. Now, the code of the proposal contract is new, has changed, now it's malicious, but the address doesn't depend on the code, it just depends on the sender and the nonce. The nonce is the same at the very beginning and the sender is the same at the very beginning, meaning that the address in this case hasn't changed, but the bytecode did. So the attacker is taking advantage of the fact that create doesn't use bytecode to determine the address, meaning that it can change the bytecode that it's using. If you want to see more resources, of course, you can go to all these great researchers that have been exploring the vulnerability, the exploit, the transactions, everything. I learned tons from that to put this talk together. I showed you the transactions, I showed you the diagram, so what I'm missing is showing you the actual code, okay? So I have a little proof of concept that doesn't reproduce the entire exploit. I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to create kind of an educational sandbox to play with these create and create2 redeployments so that it's easier to understand how these opcodes work and actually what are their main differences and how can one upgrade a contract without changing its address, which sadly is what actually attacker did for the bad. So I have here a Foundry test. I'm kind of reproducing some settings of the attack, but not entirely. So I'm gonna be using here the attacker address. I'm gonna be setting the attacker nonce to the one used during the transaction. You can see that in here. So it's a nonce number 5, that's what I'm using in the test. And I'm gonna be using this public function in the test, the test deployment, to actually do this, okay? So I coded 3 contracts. I have the deployer contract, which is the one that is gonna be coordinating everything. Then I have the proposal factory, in this case, and then I have 2 proposals. The first proposal that has a self-destruct and will be able to do something. And then we have the second proposal that doesn't have a self-destruct, but let's say that does something different from the first proposal, okay? So let's take a look at the test, and then we're gonna be seeing the codes of the deployer, the proposals, and the factories. So the test is quite simple. The attacker would first deploy the deployer contract, which is the one that's gonna coordinate everything. In this deployment, in this case, both the factory and the proposal contract are deployed. Then the attacker will call emergency stop on the deployer contract such that it will destroy the factory and proposal contracts. There's a little hack that we have to do using Foundry because self-destruct doesn't work pretty well. So we have to use a cheat code to destroy both accounts in this case. This is just a Foundry thing when we test things in a local environment that we have to do. If you want to see more details, you can go to this issue right here. This one. And then the attacker will actually go and redeploy the whole thing. And what we will notice is that the factory address at the beginning, which is this one, and the new factory address haven't changed. And the same goes for the proposal address and the new proposal address. It's noteworthy that the proposal address and the new proposal address are not different, but their code is different. Okay, so that's the main thing to notice here. So let's take a look at the deployer. The deployer has a constructor that first deploys the proposal factory using create2. In Solidity, when we pass the salt in this way, the compiler will use create2 instead of create. If we did this, it would use create. If now that we do this, it uses create2. Then the deployer is calling the create function in the factory, which is quite a simple function. It's just taking some bytecode and deploying it using create, nothing too fancy. And we store the address of the factory in this deployer contract. Okay, so that's essentially it for the construction. That's what happened essentially here. So the deployer is deployed, the proposal factory create function is called, and the first proposal, this one, is created. Okay, so at that point, the whole thing is kind of set up. Then the attacker will call emergency stop on the deployer contract, meaning that the emergency stop function will be called, which essentially will just call the emergency stop function of the proposal factory, which will call the emergency stop function of the first proposal, meaning that the first proposal will be self-destructed and the proposal factory will be self-destructed as well. Note that in this case, again, we have to do this cheat code for Foundry, but that's fine, just to replicate what would happen on mainnet. Then the deployer contract will redeploy. When it calls redeploys, it just uses the same thing to deploy the proposal factory, passing the same salt. The deployer is the same. It doesn't change anything. The code of the proposal factory is the same, but because it's using create2 and the contract has been self-destructed, it will deploy it to the same address. Once that happens, again, the factory creates a new proposal, but in this case, it uses the creation code of the second proposal, which would be, and I didn't include anything here, but would be different, right? So we pass the creation code of the second proposal, that's it, and the second proposal is created. And whatever is left is just checking that the factory address hasn't changed and the proposal address hasn't changed. We can actually run this. And note that the test passes okay, meaning that the addresses haven't changed at all. So that's it. That's how the attack essentially worked. I wanted to cover it from like the technical details. Of course, you can go online and check all these resources and find more details about the actual transactions, how the actual exploit happened, how it damaged the governance of this protocol, and many, many other things. Today I wanted to cover just from a technical standpoint what happened in the attack, such that we could understand how create and create2 were used to understand these deployments and these tricks that attackers could do in the future, so that we can be covered from them and we can understand them to avoid making the same mistakes. See you in the next time.